Hello all, welcome to R&D Labs with me Rohan, and today we are going to see how to use Alamofire Library in your Swift project. With this tutorial and a series of tutorials to follow, we are going to explore Alamofire Library and how it can be used in your Swift project. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and hitting the notification button so that you are notified next time a video comes in. For this tutorial, we are going to cover how to use Alamofire Library to query a web service URL using GET method. So how to do it? Let's get started. Tutorial, I have created a startup project in Swift using storyboards, and what we're going to do is we are going to import the Alamofire library into our Swift project, and then we are going to query a open source URL checker, which is http://bin.org, and we are going to use the get method to pass a query request. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to serialize the response that we get from the web service, and we are then going to see the size of the request and also the response time of the request. So let me just show you the GitHub repository of Alamofire, and we will copy the pod file query and create a pod file in our project. So let me bring up that for you. So this is the GitHub repository of Alamofire, and as you can see, if we scroll down, we have the pod file request command for Alamofire, which is for version 5.2. I will add the link in the description box below so that you can follow along in your own project. And first up, we will just copy this and we'll keep it ready. Next, we are going to create a pod file in our project. So I will just open up the terminal and let me just go to my project. Okay, so I'm into my project right now, and I will just create a pod file. So with the command pod init, so this will create a pod file for me. Next, I have to open up the pod file and add the pod command for Alamofire. So let me go to my Finder, and this is the pod file that we have just created, and we just have to paste the pod command over here, save it, then close it, and then we have to use a command called as pod install. Okay, so once you do this, the Alamofire library will be imported to your project. After you've done importing the pod file into your project, we have to open up the XE workspace file. So you'll have to close the Xcode and open up the project using XE workspace file. So I will close this and I will go to my Finder again, and I will go here to my project and I will open XE workspace file. So once you're done, you can see another section which is pods, and you have your project here, and I will just maximize the Alamofire RD folder, and what we are going to do here is we are going to query the http://bin.org URL. So the trigger for that will be from a button, and I will create a button in my storyboard. I will just maximize Xcode. So over here, I'm going to add a button. So I will drag a button and I will title it as get request, and I will leave it up as just like that. And next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my assistant editor and add an action for this button. So I will do that here. So let me command click and drag for the action, and I will name the action as get request, and I will just connect it and see what happens. Yes, the action is ready. Next, very important step is first to import the Alamofire library. So we will go up and add import Alamofire. There it is. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a URL to connect to. So I will create a variable by the name surl. So var surl of type string. So next we are going to set the URL to the surl variable. So we will write surl is equal to https http://bin.org and get. Since this tutorial is all about get and how to use get method, how to query a get method using Alamofire library, so that is the reason why we are using this URL. I will just show you what http://bin.org is. I will open up the URL here and let's see, http://bin.org. As you can see, there are many methods, and I will open up the HTTP method. And if you go into the get block, you can see that it is completely blank. But if you just click try it out button, you can get the URL for it. There it is. This is the URL that we are going to query, and we are going to use the same URL into our project. Okay, as you can see, we have the error code over here, which is 200, and which means okay. And this is the response body that we will be receiving. This is the response header that we also will be receiving. And since this is error code 200, it is a success message, and we will try to receive the same success message in our project as well. Along with this, what we are going to do is we are going to even check the length of the content, which is this, and also the response time that we will be receiving this content. So let's head back to our project and see what we can do over there. So next up, what we're going to do is we are going to create a data serializer variable of the type data response serializer. So let me declare that first. Let serializer is equal to data response serializer, and we will have to write empty response codes, and we'll have to set the response codes that we require, which is success. So let's say set in the brackets, we will have to add an array of it. So 200, 204 and 205. If you check the documentation of Alamofire, it says a response serializer performs minimum response checks and returns any response data as is. So in our case, what we have is the success messages or the success error codes, that is 200, 204 and 205. So if you go and check the documentation, so this is the name of the error code and the description of it. So 200 is okay, 204 is no content, but the request is received and understood. That, and the 205 status code is a request from the server to the client to reset the document from which the original request was sent. In our case, these are all successful response codes, so we will keep it as it is, and we will head back to our tutorial. Alright, so I have now just maximized my Xcode and my working window so that I've got more room to work with. Next, we are going to create a URL request variable. So let's write var sample request, and we are going to have it as a type of URL request. And we have to pass in the URL that we had created earlier. So you have to use the surl variable and pass it into URL request. Okay, so we have to write URL and of type URL and pass the variable of surl into it. Okay, so once you've done this, we have to add in a request to send this entire chunk of request into Alamofire. Okay, so AF is what we are going to use for Alamofire dot request. Okay, and then we have to send the sample request into it. So let's say sample request. All right, so this is the same variable that we had created earlier on top of type URL request. Okay, and we have to use the upload progress method of Alamofire. It's a good practice to use the upload progress so that you know the progress of your request. You can add in a progress bar or a wait cursor just to know what the progress of the request is. Okay, in the course of the series of this tutorial, and in the tutorials to follow, we'll be seeing how we can use the wait cursors just to know the progress of our request. Okay, so we will be using upload progress more extensively in this series. Okay, and we have to pass in the progress, provide a closure for it, and just leave it right there. And after you do it, you get a response back, isn't it? So we have to get the response. Okay, so the request is sent and you wait for the response for it. All right, and for the response, we already have a response serializer variable that we had created right here, and just pass in the response serializer. So here it is, and we have to add in serializer variable to it, and just leave everything blank. Just delete everything else. Okay, and after which we have to add in a response closure and and just leave it as it is. Okay, so we have to first check if the response has got any errors in it or not. Okay, so let's write if response dot error is equal to nil. Okay, and then proceed ahead. You can add in your message later on for if there is any error, you can just print a statement or just show to the user that okay, there is a error in the response, and then you can add in your try catch block as well. So anyhow, you can add that as per your convenience. So let's go ahead for this tutorial. So let's write var. Next, we are going to capture the response string from the response. Okay, so as you had seen in the website that I'd shown you from http://bin.org, this is the response string that we have. Okay, so this has got all the information from the web service that you're going to query. So the same thing, we are going to use it in our tutorial. So let's go back here and write response string, and we have to give it a type as string. Just leave it as it is, and I'm going to initialize this with a response string, and I'm going to give it as an empty text. Okay, so once you've done that, response, yeah, okay, so once you've done that, you have to even check if the response has got any data in it or not. Okay, so let's write if response dot data is not equal to nil, and you have to get the response string then and fill the information from the response or data into response string. Okay, so response string is equal to typecast it from bytes. All right, and response dot data, and we have to encode this with UTF-8. Encoding dot UTF-8. All right, so I think it is okay, and I will give the else block as well. So let's write else response string is equal to response dot description. What's going on? Response, yeah, dot description. Okay, and I will leave it right here. So you have the response, you check if there is any response data, then you add it to the response string, and if there is no data in it, you can pass in the response string description and you can show it to the user. Okay, and what else do we do? Next, we have to show this to the user, right? So let's write a print statement. Sorry, print statement, and over here we just pass response string, and we'll give it an optional value of empty. Aren't you interested to know the status code? How do we get that? It's very simple. So let's write print. So response dot response. Why am I missing a P every time I do that? Dot status code. Okay, so you have the status code right here, so you can show it to the user so that he can take corrective actions. All right, so it looks okay to me. We aren't done yet. Okay, did we add another bracket somewhere? This is there. Why is there an error here? Okay, this looks okay to me. What about this? It's also fine. The AF requests close here. I think this is extraneous. Yeah, I don't know. Somehow an extra bracket has been added. So let me just build and see, just to ensure that things are okay. Fine. So build is successful, and let's open up the output window. Yeah, and just leave it maximized so that you can see what is happening. And I will have to run this in my simulator and just see how it goes. So I will run this into iPhone 11 Pro Max, and let's run it and see. All right, so the application is plugged in. So let's click the get request button and let's see what we have here. Let's click that, and there you go. So what we have done here is we have clicked the action, that is the button that we had created on our storyboard, and with that we had the URL being passed, that is https http bin.org/get, and we had sent a request to Alamofire, and we had the response string which is serialized, and we have the response code as well. So if you go to the output window, you can see the response string which is right here, and we have the status code right up there. All right, so let's play around with this and see. If I just say if I just misspell the method over here, okay, and I will just stop this and run this again. All right, so once the application is launched again, we will just click the get request button, and we can see that the response is back from the http bin.org. It says the requested URL was not found on the server. If you have entered the URL manually, please check your spelling and try again. And you have the status code as well over here. So it is not only 200 that gets returned. You can even check for the other possibilities, the other error codes as well. So what we have over here is error 404. Next, we will just correct back the URL and we will keep it as get. Now, aren't you interested to know the exact response time and the size of the request? Okay, so let us go back and add few lines of code to get that done as well. So after I've added the URL and I've corrected the URL, let me build it and see if the project is okay. All right, and so for this purpose, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable of type nsdata. So let's write var response data and of type nsdata, and I will just declare it as it is and keep it for now. Next, I'm going to assign a response.data into the response data variable. So let's write response data is equal to response dot data, and I'm going to set it as nsdata. All right, so once you have done this, I think we will have the response data variable set, and with this we can see the length of it. So how do you see the length of the ns data? You will have to first create a variable. So let's say I data length is equal to response data dot length. Fine. It's that simple. Okay, so once you have done this, you can get the length in bytes. Okay, so you can print this, and let's say size, and you have to pass in the idata. Okay, this is a closure, I data length, and you have to just add b to it, so that people know that it's in bytes or bytes as a whole. Okay, so next is very important. We need to know the response time as well, the time interval that the request did take to come back to you. Okay, so let's write another print statement, and over here what you're going to do is we are going to add in response time, and we will add in response dot metrics. Okay, and dot task interval. Okay, so this is the task interval, or the response is already available within the response variable from Alamofire. Okay, and we have to add in duration to it, and okay, and we will give an option value of 0 as well to it, and that's it. Let's build and see. All right, and if we want to just check it in our simulator, let's go ahead and stop this first and run this on a simulator and see what we have. Okay, just click the get request button again, and there it is. So you have the size in bytes. First of all, the status code is back to 200 again, since we have corrected the URL. Then we have got the size in bytes, and this is in seconds. Okay, so if you want to have it in milliseconds, you can multiply this by 1,000, and you can get in the milliseconds as well. Okay, so the response is right here, and the milliseconds, you can do the maths later on. You can just multiply this entire block by 1000, and you can get it in milliseconds. So this is how you query a URL using a get method using Alamofire Library in your Swift project. I hope you like this video. If you have any doubts, please reach me out in the comment section. I'll be happy to help. And please like and subscribe to the channel, and see you until next time. Cheers.